Cops are often protected by qualified immunity after breaking the law. However, today we bring you cases of crooked and corrupt police officers who made some huge mistakes and were instantly owned in the courtroom. In December of 2012, suspect Anthony Waller was brought in front of a judge after he was sentenced on assault charges. As he tried to speak to the judge, the officer holding him did something terrible, taking the law into his own hands.
Investigation for false imprisonment, assault in the third degree, assault as a class 2 felony, and a misdemeanor charge as well in possession of drug paraphernalia.
I'd like to object first. If I'm under investigation, I thought the investigation came first, then the rest came.
Get on your feet. Don't turn on me. Get on your feet.
Deputy Brady Lovingair assaulted the poor man and pushed him onto the ground before taking him to jail. However, his actions were found unlawful and he was suspended from his job. He eventually resigned from the position. Meanwhile, Waller was awarded $50,000 in compensation by a federal jury. Now, while this cop made a mistake in court, this next tyrant officer was punished for something more sinister.
The court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270.
In May of 2020, Officer Derek Chauvin knelt on the neck of poor George Floyd, eventually causing his death. This led to massive protests all over the world and also the start of the BLM movement. Officer Chauvin was then charged and eventually found guilty of third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter.
I wanted to thank everybody for being here and for providing the input you did. Not just the people who were in the courtroom here, but also those who provided written statements, both from the Floyd family and the defendant's family. I've read all the impact statements that were submitted earlier and listened carefully to all the input here today. And it is truly appreciated that you took the time to stay with this case and to provide me with input. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation and carefully considered all the facts of the case and the law, but my comments are actually going to be very brief. Most of it's going to be in writing. I have a 22-page memorandum that is going to be attached to the sentencing order. And why am I doing it in writing? To emphasize the fact that determining the appropriate sentence in any case, and in this case, is a legal analysis. It's applying the rule of law to the facts of an individual and specific case. And that is why, as opposed to trying to being profound here on the record, I prefer that you read the legal analysis that explains how I determined the sentence in this case.
Now, high-profile cases like these must be handled carefully in order to set a strong precedent for the future. The judge reminded everyone that emotions do not play any part in the sentencing.
What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family. You have our sympathies. And I acknowledge and hear the pain that you are feeling. I acknowledge the pain not only of those in this courtroom, but the Floyd family who are outside this courtroom and other members of the community. It has been painful throughout Hennepin County, throughout the state of Minnesota, and even the country. But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Floyd family.
Derek stood there listening, without a trace of shame on his face. It was clear he felt no remorse for his action.
I'm going to attempt to be profound or clever, because it's not the appropriate time. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases.
Finally, after a short speech, the judge handed over the much-awaited sentence, which brought some sort of peace to Floyd's family and the people that were hurting all over the country.
Mr. Chauvin, as to count 1, based on the verdict of the jury finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 Subdivision 2, paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd.
Chauvin was also required to register as a predatory offender as his life came crashing down after being sentenced to 22.5 years in prison.
You are granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And then you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything from the defense? No, Your Honor. All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Chauvin was sent to Oak Parks Heights Prison, and in 2024, he was stabbed 22 times by another inmate. However, he is expected to make a full recovery. While Derek was punished, here is another corrupt cop who did the unthinkable and was punished in court.
In the unclassified felony of armed criminal action, I sentence you to a term of incarceration of 6 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections.
In December of 2019, 26-year-old Cameron Lamb was sitting in his car inside his garage when Officer Eric DeValken and murdered him.
Cameron Lamb is dead. And Eric DeValken, that's undisputed. Cameron Lamb was by all accounts a helpful and loving son, brother, father, and friend. People who have contacted me and who I have heard from today have described him as funny, caring, giving. Miss Gray called him a protector, a jokester, and my favorite of all the ones that I read, not a saint, but our angel.
Cameron Lamb was trying to chase his girlfriend, but halfway he changed his mind and he headed back home. The officers should have de-escalated the situation, but these tyrants were only focused on ending his life.
Also, as I'm weighing all these facts, it can't be overlooked that the events of December 3rd of 2019 were initially set into motion by Cameron Lamb and his decision to chase his girlfriend through city streets at dangerously high speeds, putting motorists and other members of the public at risk. However, those events tragically concluded with the actions of Troy Schwam and the defendant pulling up to defendant's house. Sergeant Schwam pulling into the driveway, immediately getting out with his weapon drawn, rapidly moving, without taking a breath, without pausing for the briefest of moments to consider where they were going, what they would find when they got back there, whether they were acting lawfully in doing so. That is made even more aggravating as the court considers an appropriate sentence, in this case by the fact that the one person who ultimately did take a breath that morning was Cameron Lamb.
DeValken was in civil clothes and had entered his property without notifying him. It only then took him 9 more seconds to fire his gun and kill Lamb on the spot.
He did this when at some point, while he was chasing his girlfriend, he decided to discontinue the chase and to go home. Cameron Lamb is not racing through the streets of his neighborhood at this point. He's not driving through yards to get away from anyone. He does not abandon the truck and let it roll into someone's yard while he flees on foot. Rather, he simply pulls into the driveway of his home, pulls around back, puts the vehicle into reverse, and slowly begins backing it down the driveway, under the carport, and into his garage.
The officer had no remorse on his face, and to make matters worse, the judge even tried to side with him, claiming that he did not intend to murder him.
And it is hard to accept this distinction. I know that. Murder and involuntary manslaughter arising from criminal negligence are two different things. They are different legal concepts. They are different things. Eric DeValconaire is not Derek Chauvin, who murdered George Floyd. Eric DeValconaire is not one of the 3 men in Georgia convicted of running down and Ahmaud Arbery. This is a mitigating factor. Defendant has no prior criminal history. His ORAS scores him as a low risk in all categories. Defendant's history as a police officer, husband and father, friend and colleague is also a mitigating factor that I have taken into account, as his father asked me to do, which I was already going to do, and that is to consider the totality of the circumstances and to consider the totality of the defendant's life.
Judge Dale Youngs appeared to extend some level of courtesy to the police officer, with the Kansas City Police Department also backing their officer.
The facts and the circumstances in the history of defendant's career and his life that have been presented to this court have demonstrated he has not hesitated to immediately take action when he believed the circumstances surrounding him warranted it. And this trait has generally served him and others well. It also failed him, as it did on December 3rd of 2019.
Finally, the judge announced the sentence, and sadly, it was nothing more than a slap on the wrist.
Cameron Lamb is dead. Eric DeValconaire. And the court has found that that happened because the defendant acted without considering or being aware of the substantial and unjustifiable risks associated with his conduct, and that his actions were a gross deviation from the standard of care that a reasonable person would exercise in the situation. DeValconaire, on count 1, the Class E felony of involuntary manslaughter in the second degree, I sentence you to a term of incarceration in the Missouri Division of Adult Institutions of 3 years. On the unclassified felony of armed criminal action, I sentence you to a term of incarceration of 6 years in the Missouri Department of Corrections. Those cases, or rather those counts and sentences, will run concurrent with one another for a total term of incarceration of 6 years.
DeValconaire was sentenced to 6 years in prison for brutally murdering an innocent man. Shockingly, in December of 2024, the sentence was commuted, and he is expected to be out of prison soon. Now, while this officer got lucky, this next tyrant was rightfully sentenced after doing something bizarre.
Verdict reads, we the jury, having found the defendant Aaron York Dean guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the offense of assess his punishment at confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 11 years, 10 months, 12 days.
In 2019, Fort Worth police officer Aaron Dean was called to a residence where he fatally shot the homeowner, Atiana Jefferson, from her bedroom window. He was found guilty of manslaughter. The judge did not take long to announce his sentence.
Y'all did fabulous when we did the guilt-innocence verdict, okay? Same rules apply. I don't know what this verdict is. Can't have any emotions, all right? Let's bring them in. Verdict reads, we the jury, having found the defendant Aaron York Dean guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of the offense of manslaughter, assess his punishment at confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 11 years, 10 months, 12 days. They do not assess a fine. And it is signed by the presiding juror. You may be seated. Thank you very much.
Miss Jefferson was carrying no weapons whatsoever and was coming to answer the door when the tyrant cop pulled the trigger.
Juror number 1, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 3, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 4, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 6, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 9, is this your verdict? Juror number 37, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Juror number 38, is this your verdict?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your verdict will be received and filed. Thank you very much. Mr. Gill, Mr. Brissett, is there any legal reason why sentence should not be pronounced?
No legal reason.
Mr. Dean, it's the jury having found you guilty of the offense of manslaughter and assessed this punishment. It's the order of the court you be remanded to the custody of the sheriff, be delivered to the director of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice To serve your sentence as required by law, you will receive credit for all the time that you have served in custody on this case from the date of your original arrest.
Dean was immediately kicked out of the job and now faced a prison sentence of 11 years.
If you are indigent and cannot afford a lawyer, I would conduct an indigency hearing to determine if you are indigent. And if you are indigent, I would appoint a lawyer to represent you on appeal and provide you a record of this appeal of this trial at no cost. Mr. Gill, Mr. Brissett, if y'all will remain on his case pending his decision whether he wishes to appeal, and if you'll furnish the information for the trial court certification of appeal before you leave here today, I would appreciate it. Is there an allocution? Yes. You may be seated. Thank you very much.
As of today, he continues serving his sentence in jail and is unlikely to receive any relief. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. Today we witnessed cases where corrupt and abusive police officers were humbled and held accountable in courtrooms. These tyrants made grave mistakes and were rightfully punished. Each of these thugs received the sentencing they deserved and will surely think twice before repeating their actions. If you agree with me, please support us by liking this video. Also, if you enjoyed the video, watch how these psycho Karens took on some no-nonsense cops.
Don't kick me!